military still big power in country.
They're trying to divide the society and rule it.
This is not democracy, really.
The state needs a lot of work to do to have the real and genuine human rights.
These people could easily be mistaken for Malaysian Indians or Malays. They speak the local language fluently and have lived in Malaysia for as long as 3 decades. Some of their children were born here. But unlike Malaysians, they live in fear of the police and immigration officials. They are often hunted down by the authorities, detained and sent back to their homeland. Where are these people from? What is their story?
At that time, we were so terrified, and we contact police and authorities, and we helped for so many times authorities to give security us, but authority failed to give security us, and authority just told us that don't worry, we are here to protect you, but authority didn't give us full protection, and also authority killed our houses, authority burned down our houses and some of our brothers.
These people are the Rohingya from Burma. They account for about 5% of the country's population of nearly 60 million. The Rohingya are Muslims native to the northern Arakan region of Burma, which borders Bangladesh. According to history, the Rohingya are descendants from 7th century Arab, Mughal and Persian merchants who settled in Arakan. The British promised the Rohingya a separate state when it reclaimed Burma from the Japanese, but this did not materialize. The Rohingya then formed an army and in 1947 approached newly minted Pakistani President Muhammad Ali Jinnah to incorporate northern Arakan into part of his country, which later became Bangladesh. And it was this action that started the fracture in the relationship between the Rohingya and the Burmese government. Burma is slowly opening up after 5 decades of army-imposed isolation. Since taking up the top job in the country, President Thein Sein has implemented unprecedented reforms. The change in policy has seen foreigners flocking to the country and contributed to a boost to its economy, coupled with the relaxation of business ownership and censorship laws. The relaxing of sanctions by the United States and a national election after decades of military rule went a long way to shedding Burma's pariah image. But overlapping the road to democracy is a story of terror and violence unleashed against a minority group, the Rohingya. Special permission is required to enter into these camps for internally displaced peoples. There are layers of checkpoints. Filming is not allowed. Filming of the military or police is also prohibited. But this footage was covertly shot on a phone to film the drive that led to the 8 displaced people's camps in Sittwe. A spate of violence against the Rohingya in June 2012 killed hundreds and displaced thousands of people who ended up in these camps. The violence started when a few Rohingya men allegedly raped a Rakhine Buddhist woman. The retaliation from the Buddhist community, aided by the police, has led to repeated attacks against the minority Rohingya community. 45-year-old Asma Katu lost her son on that day. He was 21 years old and married with children.
तो मोरियो गोरा गरमा दे kana kuchele ni loyani ba de utara renuani itara bilotagi kitare loyni loyani ba dam to military ayere logiyo go military ayere যখন logiyo go lojayere fusalo ira difilibe hoyi difilibe যখন hoye no derar ere bodwar del bole loyni fuse to huni de ter dohangara filai.
Months after the alleged rape, an independent pathologist who examined the body said there were no signs of rape. A government-appointed pathologist refuted his claims. After Burma's independence from the British in 1948, Rakhine Buddhists replaced Rohingya officials who were given prominent posts for their loyalty to the British. Following this, the majority Buddhists implemented discriminatory policies against the Rohingya, cementing the ethnic tension even deeper. And since the military took over the reins of leadership in a coup in 1962, the Rohingya community was systematically persecuted. If prior to the military dictatorship, the Rohingya were recognized as an indigenous ethnic nationality of Burma, the generals methodically clipped their political rights. They were not allowed to own land, and their land was confiscated. The junta imposed restrictions on their movement, preventing them from even moving from one township to another without written permission from the authorities. The Rohingya were also forced to go through a long, tedious application process to obtain permission for marriage. And recently they were banned from having more than 2 children. But most importantly, the citizenship law established by the military regime in 1982 robbed the Rohingya of their citizenship. They became stateless in their own homeland. Kin Maung Win, one of the founders of the alternative television station Democratic Voice of Burma, says the current citizenship law is just too oppressive.
It is so difficult for foreigner to become a citizen of Burma under this citizenship law. I just really wish, the opposition and the government, they sit down together to amend the citizenship law. It is so harsh. It is universal human rights. People should have the right to apply for citizenship of a country after you live a certain period. But it is not the same in Burma.
Northern Arakan's close proximity to Bangladesh, plus cross-border trade and trans-border migration, have branded the native Rohingya as Bangladeshis, and therefore they are identified as Bengalis. The Rohingya are not the only ethnic group that has suffered from state-sponsored marginalization. Many ethnic groups like the Kachin, Chin, and Karen have been forced to take up arms against the military. Although repeated ceasefire agreements were signed, armed rebellion is still continuing. To date, the armed struggle against the Karen National Union is the longest-running civil war in the world. Activists in Burma like Aung Min dubbed efforts by the government to clinch a deal with these armed groups as the business of peace.
There's a long history of fighting over the natural resources in the ethnic area by the central government. Because of the resources, they send the troops and make the country, make the particular area militarized. So they send the troops to secure and extract all these kind of resources, and that make unconflict and resistant by the ethnic people. So this is one of the reasons for over long ethnic unconflict.
While Burma's powerful leadership eyes gemstones and natural gas, activists say the military targets women. Dr. Jaba, a Kachin women's rights activist, as well as moderator at the Yangon Kachin Baptist Church, says disappearances of women in ethnic areas are just too common.
2 years ago, one of the Kachin ladies, she was going to the farm with her own family, with her husband, with her father-in-law, and with her baby son. So the government troops, they passing through the fields, and they call her to their camps. And now finally it's vanished. We don't know. Nobody knows that where she is. This kind of stories we have many.
Dr. Jaba also says the government has systematically kept development away from ethnic areas. But surprisingly, the Rohingya do not have any allies among the persecuted minority groups in Burma. In fact, the other groups do not even acknowledge the existence of the Rohingya. Political activists attribute this to the junta's policy of maintaining control over the various ethnic groups by encouraging dissent between them. But they also point out that even pro-democracy activist and the current opposition leader Aung San Suu Kyi has kept mum over the continued killings of the Rohingya. Suu Kyi has received worldwide condemnation for dismissing the persecution against the minority Muslims.
I think many of us, including me, are quite disappointed with Aung San Suu Kyi. I mean, she is a very nice woman. She is a fighter. But unfortunately, I think she has not made a stand on Rohingya. In fact, some are complaining that the one-on-two statement that she has made thus far is actually doing injustice to the Rohingyan plight. She is looking forward to standing in the next election, and she is looking at the arithmetic that the Rohingyan are like less than, or probably not more than 1% of the population, which is unfortunate in this regard, because the Rohingyan is the most persecuted group today in the whole world.
Burma's military rule was dissolved after a general election in 2010. But the military continues to illegally confiscate land, displace villagers, and indulge in forced labor. In Shan State, there were summary executions of thousands of civilians, and the displacement of tens of thousands of people for hydroelectric dam projects has given rise to people trafficking.
In the ethnic area, we have a long history of human rights violation documentation against the ethnic people. It's still continuing. You know, when there's a place of war, the women and children are the most vulnerable group. The same thing happening. Many young children and the young people live in the IDP places without any security. Many of them become victims of trafficking to export them to neighboring countries like China.
Trafficking does not just happen in ethnic areas, but in the IDP camps for the Rohingya as well. Life in these camps is hard, the Rohingya say. They depend on international agencies like the World Food Programme, UNHCR, UNICEF, Red Cross, and Doctors Without Borders for food, medicine, and other basic necessities. The Burmese government recently ordered Doctors Without Borders to leave the state of Arakan, accusing them of favoring the Rohingya Muslims. The decision cut off access to medicine and healthcare, severely affecting children, sick people, and pregnant women. In the weeks that followed, many Rohingya died from treatable diseases. Rare diseases such as this are common. The government has invited MSF to resume its work in Sittwe, but it's unclear as to under what terms and conditions. MSF, however, has not returned to these IDP camps as of the third week of September 2014. This means that tens of thousands of people here will have no access to basic health care, including facilitating life-saving referrals for patients, as well as family planning and care for pregnant women and newborn babies. Added to that, they still face state-sponsored persecution in the IDP camps. They say the police and military forcefully take men and boys away under the pretext of investigations, and they usually turn up dead. And the women are raped. Saeed Hussein is a small-time trafficker who says he believes he is helping his people to leave their suffering behind at the IDP camps. He facilitates boat trips for the Rohingya, who are willing to undertake the perilous sea journey to neighboring countries. Saeed says it's the only means of escape for the Rohingya, who face a bleak future in Burma. They pay between $100 and $200 to escape the dreadful camps in small boats. Halfway through the boat ride, they are sold to traffickers who own bigger boats. Saeed says these traffickers demand $2,000, a sum beyond the means of the Rohingya people, and those who cannot pay are killed. According to Saeed, 16 people whom he smuggled out of the IDP camps were killed in Thailand. The Rohingya refugees often flee to Thailand or Malaysia. Rohingya leaders in Malaysia, like Muhammad Sadek, say the Rohingya women face brutal torture and rape at the borders.
Some single ladies got pregnant. Some single ladies died over the entire border because of routine sexual harassment. But it's not coming in any report.
Malaysia is already home to 40,000 Rohingya refugees, the UNHCR says. The influx following the continuing spate of violence since June 2012 has caused a huge strain on the community's limited resources. Malaysia has not ratified the 1951 UN Refugee Convention, leaving these people in a legal limbo.
Many Rohingya believe that if we can manage to arrive in Malaysia, we can survive, we can work. We may have more freedom. Unfortunately, their faith, their hopes remain in uncertainty.
The Rohingya cannot work legally or send their children to state schools. Even when they do try to get a job, they end up in a very exploitative situation because the employers know they cannot seek redress. The Malaysian government recently said it would consider giving work permits to the Rohingya. There are no signs of this happening.
Number one is, of course, it has something to do with ratifying the International Convention on Refugee, because when you don't do that, some civil society organizations find it difficult to even get better funding from international sponsors to help those who are already here.
And the Rohingya community is at the mercy of the police, immigration, and other enforcement agencies like the volunteer militia Rela. They continue to be detained despite holding UNHCR refugee cards, and immigration officials have also been accused of involvement in selling Rohingya refugees to gangs in Thailand. So most of the Rohingya in Malaysia have no money to feed their families. Many live near jungles in makeshift homes, and all are extremely vulnerable. Besides this, they also have other pressing problems.
70 to 80% of the Rohingya refugees in Malaysia are suffering from psychiatric problem. That means psychological problems, because they cannot do anything. They are worrying for their children. They are worrying for their families. They cannot work in Malaysia. They cannot earn enough money.
Most of these Rohingya have families back in various towns in Sittwe, including Aung Mingala, which is the last settlement of the Rohingya. There are close to 1,300 families here. The movement of the people here is restricted. They are only allowed to leave the settlement twice a week to go to the markets outside the IDP camps. But these people do not have money for essential items such as rice, beans, fuel, firewood, chili, and medicine. They are not allowed to work. Sittwe is the capital of Arakan. Viewpoint, which looks out into the Bay of Bengal, is the most well-known attraction here. It is also bustling with shops and a morning market, despite the ongoing clashes between the Rohingya and Rakhine Buddhists. People go about their work, but tensions run high, and respected leaders, including the assistant monk of the 100-year-old Shui Zedi monastery, blame the Rohingya.
မရှိလို့မရှိလို့တဲတဲ့တခါလည်းမပေါ်လို့ကိုကိုကကစားဘူးပဲညဆိုတဲလို့ကိုသားကိုကကစားလို့ကိုသားကိုကကစားလို့တဲမတဲလို့ပတ်သက်ပဲရန်သူဘကလာပြီးနေမီလူပါဝဲနောက်ပြီးငိုရခိုင်မျိုးသမီးတို့စော်ကားရမတိမှုကြရရခိုင်လူတူကိုတဲတယ်ရခိုင်မျိုးသမီးကိုကြောင်းမတိမှုကြရရပဲလို့
The clashes have also displaced Rakhine Buddhists, forcing some 3,000 families to live in 2 IDP camps. But one look at the Rakhine Buddhists' camps reveals more comfortable houses and better sanitation. Children here even go to school. Mong Uta is the chief of the Chatrocha IDP camp. He accuses the Rohingya of starting the killings. The rape of the Rakhine Buddhist woman could hold a terrifyingly complex strategy, some activists say.
These riots are more systematic. We believe these were orchestrated by very powerful force. The incidents are quite similar. For example, in the first place, the Buddhists are the victims because of a crime committed by a Muslim. And then the Buddhists angrily responded. And then the Muslims became victims of the riots. So quite similar on all riots happen all over the country. So it is well orchestrated. And then the mobs who are attacking each other in several occasions, strangers, they are not from that locale.
Who could have strategized such a dangerous political game, and why? The answer could lie with the occupants of these luxury homes in an upmarket district in Rangoon. These wealthy people, activists say, are top-ranking military officials, ruling politicians, or their close allies. The rest of the country is made up of a small middle class and a huge chunk of hardcore poor, earning an average annual income of less than $200 per capita. While Burma's accelerated reform agenda might not directly benefit the poor yet, it might take a whack at the wealthy elite.
I don't think the government is behind. It is not for the benefit of the government. They want to portray themselves, they are reformers, and they will not create such a problem because it will not be for their benefit. But someone who will not get any benefit from this change, they want to undermine the change. So by creating this kind of riot and the government is not controlled, and then maybe sometimes they mislead that the government is part of that. But I don't believe that.
Burma's most powerful ministries, security and defense, are under the tight grip of the military. The country's federal constitution states that 25% of cabinet posts must be reserved for the generals. And therefore, social activists like Myo Min claim the relinquishing of power by the military might not amount to very much.
Actually, Burma non-transforming process, so-called democratic transformations, under the name of democratic transformation process is going on. At the same time, they also legitimize their marginalization policy. So current government, you see, they are quasi-civilian government. 70% of the cabinet member are ex-military people. And also, some ministers are still with uniform, military uniform. They are in the cabinet. So according to the constitution, military has big power.
Indonesia's demilitarization exercise is something that Burma's military could learn from. But how much power is the military willing to relinquish? Prominent political scientist Professor Zakaria Ahmad in Malaysia's federal capital of Kuala Lumpur points out that military participation means the generals must become politicians. Can the military deal with the active participation of the people and compromises? Or will their concern hinge on the possibility that democracy means they will eventually be booted out of government? Professor Zakaria says the big slot allocated for military participation in parliament is a backdoor deal for the military to maintain its interests.
I'm not so sure that they have an idea of sharing of power. And if they have the idea of sharing of power, then of course the military would want to say that, in the last analysis, they would have the final say.
Burma's government has distanced itself from the military and also from the violence against the Rohingya. It is currently engaged in peace talks with rebel groups in an effort to demonstrate its commitment to reforms. Professor Zakaria says much of these talks are not aimed at national reconciliation, an element crucial in a deeply divided nation. Many academics and human rights workers agree that politicians from both camps, including Suu Kyi, are reluctant to call for a national reconciliation to heal the gaping wounds which have kept all the various ethnic groups divided, suspicious and wary of each other. Others say the peace talks are not focused on allowing the ethnic groups and even majority Buddhist Burmans their rights. And neither does it signal the beginning of a long, tedious process toward the recognition of the Rohingya as citizens.
The Myanmar Peace Center signed an agreement with the Kachin Independent Army in Myitkyina. At the same time, there was a fighting and there was shelling by the military on the Kachin people. So there's a lack of coordination, lack of transparency, and people does the way they like to do. So how the local people can trust and ensure that this is the kind of real peace? Because peace should be coordinated. The whole process should be coordinated by all different stakeholders, government, army, armed groups, and the peace center. But there's a lack of coordination that makes peace process very, very complicated too.
Burma has much at stake now. While businesses are flocking to the Golden Land, its every move is scrutinized and weighed against purported reforms. The country's chairmanship of the regional grouping ASEAN in 2014 symbolizes an acceptance into the global community. Civil society groups are hopeful this will pressure Burma to work on its appalling human rights record and stop all abuses against the Rohingya and other ethnic groups. But this hope could be way too simplistic, as the Burmese government has already said it would not entertain any discussion of the Rohingya issue in ASEAN meetings.
Next year, 2015, Malaysia will assume the chair of ASEAN. And I think it is like an obligation for Malaysia to bring the Rohingya issue back to the table. Because while this year, Yangon or Naypyidaw is chairman of ASEAN, they have successfully, muted the idea. It's not appearing at all in the last summit, and I think this is really an injustice. I think the least that Malaysia can do, as chairman of ASEAN, is to bring back the issue to the table.
It seems unlikely that ASEAN will go beyond mere words to ease the suffering of the Rohingya people. The Malaysian government, despite playing up its Islamic credentials now and then, adamantly refuses to assimilate the Rohingya into Malaysian society. Activists working closely with the Rohingya groups in Burma, like Mohammed Shahid, believe that the government does not have the political will to stop the persecution.
This is the ethnic cleansing. They want to clean this Rohingya from the Burmese land.
Unwanted and hunted down in both Burma and Malaysia, the Rohingya only have one choice: to keep trying to flee to safety.